Hello people. As the plastic coolant houses and radiator tanks age, they become brittle and prone to cracking. They also lose their black colour and become brown, which is a good sign that they need to be replaced. This thermostat housing was cracked, leaking, and needed replacing. To start the process, you need to drain the coolant. Under the front right hand side, there is an access hole to reach up to the radiator's drain tap. I believe that some models don't have this access hole, so you would need to remove the plastic drip tray to be able to reach this. Be sure that you have a catch pan ready to collect the old coolant as it drains. The hose coming out of the top of the housing on this one is already out as it was broken, so that's done. The clamp and the radiator hose is next. This hose can then be pushed out of the way. Next, you need to remove the bracket, securing the wiring harness and more coolant hoses. Looking at the new housing, you can see that a 10mm nut needs to be removed. With that bracket removed, you can now unplug the electrical connectors from the thermostat housing. Also, unplug the O2 sensor to give yourself some more room. With everything out of the way, it's now easy to access the 4 bolts that secure the thermostat housing. To remove the heater hoses, there was limited space at the housing end, so I chose to remove them from where they enter the firewall. To do this, you need to free the retaining clip and slide them off. Do this on both hoses, and be aware that you will get some coolant draining out when you disconnect them. At the front of the housing, there are 2 bolts that secure a metal coolant hose. These also need to be removed. The metal coolant hose can remain in position as the other end is supported by the oil cooler assembly. Now, the 4 10mm bolts can be undone, and the thermostat housing, complete with the heater hoses, can be removed. With the new and old thermostat housing side by side on the bench, it's easy to remove the clamps and the heater hoses and swap them over. Note that the hose has a notch to ensure the correct alignment. It also has markings as to the position of the clamp, so be sure to line this up as well. Before you fit the new thermostat housing, be sure that the old gasket has been removed and the surface is clean, ready for the new gasket. Also check the O-ring seal in the metal coolant hose as to whether it needs to be replaced or not. To install, feed the heater hoses back into the engine bay and line up the bolts loosely to secure the thermostat housing back onto the engine. With the housing correctly lined up, begin to tighten all the bolts. Be sure to tighten the bolts evenly so the gasket seats correctly and no unnecessary stress is placed on the housing. Next, reinstall the metal coolant hose with the 2 bolts to the front of the housing. Then the radiator hose with clamp can be reinstalled. Plug the 2 electrical connectors in. Be sure that they're fully clipped in and locked into place. Now connect the coolant hose that runs to the throttle body. This was a new hose for me and it was really tight, so I used some soapy water spray to make it easier to slide on and lock into place. Next, the bracket that supports the wiring harness and the other coolant hoses can be bolted down. Be sure to clip everything back into its correct location. If any of the clips broke when you remove them, use cable ties to keep everything secure. Again, I used some soapy water spray when I connected the heater hoses to make it easier. Be sure that these slip-on connectors have fully locked into place, as you don't want them to pop off when the system is under pressure. Now before we top up the coolant, you need to open the air bleed hole in the radiator. This is located at the top right of the radiator in a hard to see and reach spot. Fully remove this plug and check that the sealing O-ring is present and in good condition. Do one last check that all coolant hoses are attached and start to fill the system. Be watching the air bleed hole for coolant coming out. When you see the coolant coming out of here, reinstall the plug. With that done, jump in the car and start it up. Make sure the AC is off and turn up the heat so the coolant can flow through the heater core to purge out any air in the system. You want to be able to feel some heat coming through the vents. Allow the engine to warm up a little and keep topping up the coolant as needed. You will see some bubbles in the coolant reservoir as air is being bled out of the system. Once the air is fully bled out, put the cap on and allow the engine to reach its full operating temperature. This will pressurize the system and it's a good time to be checking again for leaks. Let the engine completely warm up and wait for the cooling fans to engage and disengage. With this done, take the car for a drive. Once it has cooled down, check and top up the coolant if needed. Now if you like the video, give it the thumbs up and subscribe. Leave any questions or comments below and be sure to check out some of my other videos.